first thing I did was obtain the patient's history. Next, I will measure weight using a standard balance or electronic scale. We don't have either of those, so we won't be doing that today. However, when you weigh a patient, they must be shoeless and remove any extra clothing or heavy clothing. After you weigh them, you should measure their height using the measuring pole on the balance scale. For an accurate reading, the patient must be shoeless, and you extend the headpiece directly over the head for an accurate reading. We measure the weight and height to make sure they match up with the recommended range. Next, I will orally take the patient's temperature. A normal temperature in a resting person is 37 degrees Celsius, with a range of 35.8 to 37.3 degrees Celsius. Next, I will take the patient's pulse. When taking pulse, you must look at the rate. In a normal adult, normal heart rate ranges from 60 to 100 beats per minute. To accurately take the pulse, palpate the radial pulse epiflexor aspect of the wrist along the radius bone. If the rhythm is regular, count the number of beats for 30 seconds and then multiply by 2. If the rhythm is irregular, count for a minute. The rhythm is important to make sure that the pulse has an even tempo. When taking pulse, it's also important to look for force, or to feel for force, because it shows the strength of the heart stroke volume. The pulse force is recorded using a 3-point scale, 3 being full, 2 being normal, 1 being weak, and 0 being absent. I would say this patient has a force of 2, which is normal. Also, while taking pulse, I'm feeling for normal elasticity, which would make the artery feel slightly springy, straight, and resilient. I would say this patient has normal elasticity. Next, you should look at the respirations. However, you shouldn't let the patient know you're looking for respirations, because if they're aware of what you're doing, their breathing will change, which is why it's a good idea to take respirations while you're checking their pulse. To accurately take the respirations, count the number of breaths they take for 30 seconds or a minute if it looks abnormal. Also, take into consideration the patient's positioning while breathing. Look at if they're hunched over, if they're flexed back. When taking blood pressure, it's important to remember the golden standard, which is 120/80. Cuff size is very important too. The cuff should equal 40% of the circumference of a person's arm, and then the length should be 80% of that. So the arm should be supported at heart level, and the patient's feet should be flat on the floor. What you want to do is have the center of the cuff about 2.5 centimeters above the brachial artery and wrap it evenly. You want to place the bell of your stethoscope over the site of the brachial artery. Next, you want to inflate the cuff until there is no pulse, and then you want to go 20 to 30 millimeters of mercury higher than that. You should deflate the cuff at a steady pace. Listen for the first sound, which is the systolic pressure, and then listen for the second sound, or the last sound, which is the diastolic pressure. This patient has a blood pressure of 116/82. And that is it.